And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Welcome back to the Freedom First podcast, where we bring on experts and heroes from all walks of life to have in-depth conversations about the most important topics and issues our world is facing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Freedom First podcast. I'm your host, Blaine Smotherman, and today's episode is brought to you by 2X Print Company. 2X Print Company will take care of all your printing needs, anywhere from sweatshirts, hats, shirts, and more. You can contact 2X Print Company on Instagram at 2xprintco or through email 2xprintco@gmail.com. Being able to protect yourself and your family is ever so important, but being properly trained is vital. If you are looking for firearm training and safety courses, make sure to contact Jeffries Firearm Training. Anywhere from intro and basic courses for men and women to classes for the most advanced firearm experts. Ronnie Jeffries will take care of all your needs. Make sure to contact Jeffries Firearm Training on Instagram at Jeffries Firearm Training or through email jeffriesfirearmtraining@gmail.com. Today we have on an exciting guest, Mr. Tony Hoffman. Tony is a Clovis, California native who has an incredible story of going from prison to the Olympics. Tony has battled addiction, homelessness, depression, and even thoughts of taking his own life. Tony has spent time homeless, living on the streets of Fresno, and suffering from a serious drug addiction. He would eventually be sentenced to a 4.5-year prison sentence for armed robbery. After being released from prison, he would go on to race BMX professionally at the Olympic level. Today, Tony is a motivational speaker and speaks over 200 days a year to schools, conferences, and businesses. He is a professional BMX coach who has coached several world champions and athletes from Australia to Bolivia. And in 2016, Tony and another Central Valley native, professional BMX racer Brooke Crane, went on to the Olympics in Rio. He has since started several businesses, including his nonprofit organization, the Free Will Project. And Tony has continued to be a voice for those battling drug addiction and mental health. He has been sober for over 12 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great and powerful Tony Hoffman. Welcome to the Freedom First podcast, Tony. This is the fourth episode, so I'm so excited to have you on and get to tell our listeners, your story. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Anytime I get an opportunity to share my story on a podcast or anywhere, really, it means a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have this conversation today. So on the Freedom First podcast, we have a segment called the Freedom Minute. So this is basically 5 rapid fire questions to break the ice and let our listeners get to kind of an insight into your life. So the first question is, what was your first car?
72 Suburban, Chevy Suburban.
And how long did you drive that for?
I think a year or two.
A year or two?
Yeah.
Nice. Second question, which I kind of always like to ask my guests, your favorite superhero and why?
Oh, man. I didn't really have a favorite superhero. The Underdog or Peabody and Sherman were my favorite.
Oh,
Peabody was my favorite because he had knowledge of the past, and then the Underdog because he was the underdog. Nobody expected him to be a superhero.
All right, there you go. Who was your celebrity crush growing up?
Oh, man. What's her name from Double Jeopardy? Gosh, I can't think of her name. She's a total nut job now, though. I can't think of her name. She was in Double Jeopardy. So if you're not sure who I'm thinking of, just look up Double Jeopardy, the movie. Yeah, she was the lead role in that. Do you know who it is?
I don't know, but I guess I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. We could probably Google it right now.
Yeah.
We got time for that?
Yeah.
All right, let's Google it. Hang on. Ashley Judd.
Ashley Judd.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm familiar with it now.
Yeah, she's a loon now, though. But Ashley Judd.
All right, there we go. And the fourth question. So I think this is a pretty important question. I'm a history teacher, so I could just go on with this one. But if you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone throughout history, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Alexander the Great. Because he was literally one of the few people that was going to take over the known world. He was on a conquest to take over pretty much what the world was at that point. And I would just kind of like to get his insight on why he wanted to do that and what his plans were with, taking things over. And then, he suddenly died of the flu. So, Alexander the Great or Kanye West.
Could you imagine the conversation with Alexander the Great or Kanye West?
Yeah, I mean, Alexander the Great would be absolutely first choice. I don't know. He's always had a place of interest for me just because, his name's cool, obviously, but he was one of the most powerful commanders of an army in history, right?
Yeah.
He almost took over the world.
And generals and commanders still study him, his techniques and strategies today.
Yeah, definitely.
Powerful. Last question of the Freedom Minute. If you were selected as president of the United States of America for a day, what would be the first thing you would do?
I want to say probably make it easier to become a citizen. I think that's what I would do. I think just making the pathway easier. Like I have several friends that have come here. I have one friend, she came here from Iran when she was 9. She just got her citizenship at like 30. It takes a long time and it takes a lot of money. People don't realize how much time and how much money it takes. And sure, you could say, well, that's the dues that you got to pay. Well, in reality, our ancestors didn't wait 30 years to become citizens.
Right.
Right. We've just completely politicized immigration, and it's so segregated now with both sides having such strong opinions that are completely opposite of each other. I think that we could alleviate a lot of that by just making it easier to become a citizen.
Yeah. How many people, like American citizens, couldn't even pass a citizenship test?
I don't know. I've never even seen it. I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't know, but they make you know a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I've looked at it before, and I've had actually some teachers actually have students take it. And also there's a percentage, I don't remember the exact percent, but there's like some studies that have been done, like a certain percentage of Americans couldn't even pass their own citizenship test. So,
well, I believe that. I mean, there's always been those talk shows that go into the street and ask Americans just fundamental questions like, who's on a $20 bill?
Yeah.
Most people don't know that. Or who's even on the dollar bill? Most people don't know that. Or how many states are in the United States? They don't know those questions. Right. So I could see why.
Yeah. Like how many people couldn't even name our vice president right now or the previous vice presidents? Well, maybe they could now.
You never know, man. I don't know. You can't put anything by anybody these days.
Yeah. So thank you. So that kind of wraps up the Freedom Minute, just gives our listeners insight into your life and kind of a few things before we go into our conversation today.
For sure.
So usually I kind of start with our listener and kind of give our listeners a chance to have our guests tell their story. But your story is just huge and it's so long. And I kind of reached out to you after I'd showed my students your Goalcast video that went viral. And I teach in an area of pretty high poverty, and there's a lot of students that were able to connect with that. And I had students come to me after showing you, like, hey, like, my father was, in prison, or he is, or talking about drug addiction in their family. So I want you to kind of just start off and kind of tell your story. I know it's your story is kind of going from prison to the Olympics.
Yeah,
that's what you always say, like whether it's on your Instagram bio, in your YouTube videos. So how did it begin? Because you talk about being in middle school and kind of having suicidal thoughts and being involved in drugs that age. And as a middle school history teacher, I see that, and I see these kids have mental illness already at 12 and 13 years old. I see drugs in the community, even starting at that age. What led you into that?
I would say it was a skewed perspective of experiences that I was having, right? Everybody has experiences, and many of our experiences in our early childhood are shaping who we are, whether we know that or not. Many people don't know that the way they behave, the way they think, the way they talk, the places they go, or the friends they're hanging out with, and all these things that they do are really just a culmination of habits that were built in their early childhood. They were belief systems that were built in their early childhood. They are trauma responses to these experiences from when they were children or young teens. And so for me, it all started really with a misperception of what was actually happening in my life, because I developed this story that I can't, I won't, and I'll never be able, as a result of what I would say emotionally absent parenting, and not by my parents doing like intentionally. My parents didn't intend to be emotionally uninvolved in my life, right? They provided for me. They've been married 46 years. I come from an upper middle class family, went to one of the top public schools in the United States. Like I had everything, kind of, I don't want to say given to me, but my parents provided for me. They made sacrifices to be in Clovis. They made sacrifices to move to an area where schools were great for kids. They made sacrifices with their own time so they could provide financially for shoes, for school equipment, for sports equipment, for anything that I might need to be successful. But me personally, the way I work as a human being is I'm more grounded on emotion than I am on materials. And that's not for everybody, right? Some people need materials and that's all they want, right? They would prefer that their parents provide them the materials and then they would take care of themselves at that point. For me, I'm not like that. My brother is very black and white like my family. So him growing up under the same household with the same rules, with the same set of parenting, he turned out totally different than me. But that's because he was processing our experiences completely different. Right? My brother doesn't respond to emotion the same way that I do. He has that tougher, resilient, no need to necessarily feel and process emotion. You just get it done. He's very much like a boomer, so to speak, but he's the very first year of the millennials, but he's not in the sense of his emotional awareness or emotional intelligence or how he feels and processes emotions. And so I built this I won't, I'll not be able story when my desire as a human being, or at the soul level is what I call at the soul level. I would say that the soul level of a human being is oftentimes an unconscious layer that needs something from a parent, right? And for me, my soul craved my dad's attention. My dad's attention was number one. It's not my mom. It's never been my mom. My mom does not give me life. She doesn't take life away from me. She can tell me the meanest things or the greatest things, and neither one have the ability to affect me emotionally, to stop me from putting out or doing things, right? But my dad, he is my validating figure. He's my hero. So when he communicates to me, it means the world. It's almost as if God is speaking to me, right? Like, this is the person I need to tell me I'm great. This is the person that I need to teach me how to work around failure. This is the person that I need to show up and just watch. You don't even have to say anything. Just watch. Just be there so I can feel like you care. Well, basketball being my first dream, I was very gifted at basketball, and my biggest craving at the soul level was for my dad to just come to my games, and I didn't have my dad at my games. And because he didn't come to my games, I told myself that my dad didn't love me, that if my dad's not here, then it must be because I'm not good enough. My dad's not here because he doesn't love me, because maybe I'm not good enough, and that's why. And so I would see everybody else's parents that were in the stands, and I thought to myself, well, everybody else's parents get here. Why can't mine? My dad dropped out of high school. He works in the transportation business, and he was in management, and there's not really any room for him to take off time from work. The guy worked 14-hour days, got up at 5, was out the door at 5:30, 6 at the latest, and he didn't come home till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. We ate super late, and so it was like I was raised by my babysitter. I went through school and had these sports that I was involved in, and I was kind of like a lone wolf, right? Like I'm the one that doesn't have parents at school sports. They could come to soccer games and they could come to baseball games, but I never played soccer for the school, and I never played baseball for the school. It was always Babe Ruth Little League, or it was travel soccer leagues. Those things happen on the weekends, or they happen at 6 p.m. My dad could get off of work at that time to come and watch me play, right?
Right.
Or my mom was there, and I didn't really care if my mom was there. I didn't want her. It's not that I didn't want her there, but I didn't need her there. So I processed this experience in a way that was building a hardwired story into my brain that was going to become a self-destructive part of who I am. And it's a story that I still confront all the time. A lot of the mechanisms of how I behave and what I've been working on in my behavior at 37 years old, almost in November, I'll be 37, has been a result of these experiences as a young child, 12, 13 years old, right? Well, I had a lot of social anxiety issues, so I couldn't make friends easily. It wasn't easy for me to talk to people. I was 35 years old when I walked up to a girl for the first time and said hello to her and asked if I could give her my number and maybe we could get some coffee. Like 35 is when I did that for the first time. You know what I mean?
That's crazy.
Guys do this at like 10 years old, 12 years old. Like, no, me, 35. And some people would look at me and judge my book, the cover of my book by the way I look, right? And they'd be like, oh yeah, this guy's smooth. He probably gets all the ladies and talks to all the ladies and just has all kinds of courage, or he doesn't even have to talk to the ladies. And it's like, no, actually, I'm not that way.
And deep down, you had this like inner kind of struggle then, it sounds like.
Because I wanted to be a person that was outgoing. I wanted to go to my buddy's birthday party, and when everybody was dancing or doing the Jello race or whatever it was, have fun, but I couldn't. It was never fun for me. Birthday parties were never fun. Dances were never fun because my social anxiety was so high. I always felt like I was being judged and I couldn't just move about my time and enjoy the experience. And I hated myself for that.
Did it show on the outside?
Probably not.
Like, so people kind of, you had talked about maybe people thought you were kind of smooth. You know, you said you were good.
That's just by the way I look.
Right.
Right. I have the cool kid look.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to toot my horn. I just do. And I always have had that. Right. So people would look at me and think, oh, he's cool.
Yeah. And good athlete. You said growing up, you were kind of running the point guard, growing up in middle school. And so you were good at sports and you had this talent. But you mentioned, you know, when you tell your story that you didn't want to be good and you didn't really care.
Yeah, that was, my parents put me in sports. I played sports and I was really good at sports. It was an escape. When I played sports, I felt like I was at home. It helped me escape from the things that I was struggling with. But at the same time, there was a lot of exacerbated struggles because of my gift. You know, you have a lot of people looking up to you. I have social anxiety. I don't want people looking up to me. I don't take compliments well. I'm just doing what I do. And it's God-given, you know? And it was like, there was a competitor in me that liked it, right? Because I'm a competitor. I don't like to lose, right? I don't love winning. I hate losing, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I am.
Yeah,
Some
I totally
people love winning. I don't. Winning has never done anything for me. I freaking hate losing. And when I hate losing, I will do whatever it takes to not lose because losing just is the worst feeling in the world to me. So there was a competitor side to me that did enjoy sports, but I didn't necessarily want the responsibility that came with my gift because I was always singled out because I was the best guy. Well, you could be a champion or you need to be a leader and you have to do this and you have to do that. And it was like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to play sports.
Right. And all while you're doing this, you were kind of struggling inside. You had talked about having suicidal thoughts already at a young age.
12.
At 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my anxiety, social anxiety led to depression. The depression and isolation kind of went hand in hand. And then it's like I have this, you know, discontention with who I am and how I experience these feelings. I don't want to be experiencing the way I am. I didn't have the coping mechanisms to deal with my feelings. You know, like I said, my parents are very unintelligent emotionally as human beings. And so they didn't know how to show up for me emotionally and teach me how to navigate these emotions that I was experiencing. It was very foreign to them. And so I just found myself in a place where I was just in complete disgust with who I am.
Right. And
despite the extraordinary gift of sport.
Right.
Right. Where all these kids are looking up to you, you know? I wish I could be him. I wish I could play sports the way he plays sports. I wish I could be in his position. He's always the starter. He's always the MVP. He's always this. And it's like, you know, I didn't necessarily like that. I just liked competing. You know, I didn't like the attention that came with it.
Right. And at that age, and I think we're seeing, based on statistics and stuff, we're seeing this mental illness, depression starting at a younger and younger age. Why is that?
Social media has a big part of it, period. And the reason that social media has a big part of it is that we now have access to individuals and we don't know what the individuals actually have, right? And the individual who has a social media, let's say they have 1 million followers, right? We don't know if those followers are bought. Right now, I have the money in my bank account to go buy 1 million followers.
Right.
So then every kid that follows me, oh my God, he's got 1 million followers. They don't know that I bought those followers. Most people don't know I bought those followers if I were to do that. Most people wouldn't know that I went to Amazon and bought a bunch of fake money and rubber banded it and acted like I was rich, or that the clothes I was wearing is fake, or the car is rented. And, these vacations are, being funded by my rich parents and not actually me and my hard work. There's all of these facades, right, that people can play in social media. And you have these kids, a generation of kids who are following these influencers or people of influence, and they're looking towards the things that they have. And they're comparing themselves and their situation, and they don't measure up, right?
Right.
It's no different than what I was doing at 12 years old. I just wasn't comparing myself to Jake Paul. I wasn't comparing myself to Casey Neistat. I was comparing myself to my friends who were more outgoing, who could go to dance parties and dance and do all of these things, right? And when I couldn't do that, I hated myself for not being able to do that. Well, now we have social media where we can not only compare ourselves to our friends, but we can compare ourselves to the societal status quo, right? But we, as young men and women, we don't understand that the status quo that we're looking at is not really the status quo.
Right. It's just fake.
Right. It's a false perception of reality, right? You don't know. You've never even paid a bill or taxes or gone to school or had a job, have kids, raised a kid, bought a house, took out a loan, bought a car. You don't actually know how life works. It's easy for me to sit back and watch some things that are happening online and say, come on, this is clearly smoke and mirrors. You know what I mean? This person is clearly smoke and mirrors. It's clearly just for show. And that's great. Do what you do. Right? But I don't compare myself to those people now. I compare myself to myself. But these youngsters, they don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
They're trying to obtain a social status that will get approval from society for them.
Right. And I'm seeing this with students that I'm teaching right now. They all pretty much have cell phones now at 11, 12, even younger than that. But the students I'm teaching, 11, 12 years old, and the, I guess all the students coming to not only teachers, but psychologists is through the roof. And they're coming for different issues, whether it's bullying, whether it is that kind of, I guess, being stuck on social media and comparing themselves to others and trying to basically reach this standard that's not real, like you had talked about.
And you know what? It will be for some, right? For some, they will become Instagram famous. For some, they will become TikTok famous. For some, they will become YouTube stars, right? It's possible.
Absolutely.
And I think that if somebody wanted to obtain that, I would say go for it, right? But I would say when you go for it, you must understand this is how the game is played. This is how the game works.
Right.
Right? This has to be about us. This has to be about helping others. This has to be, and helping others, by the way, is making them laugh, making them cry, making them feel good. There's all types of ways to be an influencer and it be about other people and not yourself.
And always having a purpose behind what you're doing.
Right. When it's about us, right, we're chasing that status quo. What happens when we don't reach that status quo? We find ourselves in a place of complete and utter discontent. It's a spiritual mess. Because we're trying to obtain things. We're not trying to help people. There's not a greater purpose to our work. And so, go after your dream if that's what you want to do, but understand that the game is not meant to take care of you so you can just be great.
Yeah. Because eventually, if you're just chasing these material possessions and money, you're going to continue chasing it. It's never enough. So if you don't have those kind of building blocks and that purpose behind what you're doing, eventually it's going to come to a head.
Well, right, because here's the other deal. When a person's desire is backed by an ill intent, they will do whatever it takes to get what they desire, which means lie, cheat, and steal. And people who lie, cheat, and steal, they will always lose what they've stolen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Lance Armstrong lost all of his Tour de France titles. The baseball players were all punished for their cheating. You know, we think about these guys who have all cheated big and they lose their stuff eventually. You know what I'm saying? If you are focused on helping others as the sole purpose of why, and if you're gifted at what you do, then you will be blessed for your gift. You will be blessed for your work. And in that blessing, you can become a blessing to other people, right? That is sustainable work. Right. It's sustainable worth because you always have a relevance and you're always providing something for other people that they can use, right? So you're receiving in your giving, but you're also receiving in your blessing because you're putting your gift and your work out into the universe.
Right.
How do you teach that to a young kid?
Yeah.
How do you teach that?
I mean, they're still trying to develop their, they're still developing mentally as well. So it's like, it is hard to teach that.
Most parents don't know it.
Yeah. And especially, there's a lot of single moms that are raising these kids as well. And, moms trying to work 2-3 jobs to support the kids. So guess what? The kids they don't have that, that parent at home and they come to school. Their safe place is at school.
Which is scary.
Is at school. And especially right now.
So what I say is, and I talk about this at medical conferences. I speak at a lot of medical conferences. There's 3 important layers to a healthy and active person, human being. 1, it's validation at home. 2, it's validation in institutions. And 3, it's validation in society. The most important one is the one at home, because the one at home allows them to not need 2 and 3, right? You don't need institutional validation and you don't need societal validation because everything that you needed to feel and be encouraged and empowered by or nurtured by came from your mother and father in the home in the first 12 years of their life. At that point, they would go on and experience life and its struggles and its triumphs, its successes and its failures. And they would navigate those experiences with healthy coping mechanisms emotionally. So if institutions shut them down, no big deal. They'll go to another one. If society spit in their face and told them they weren't good, like they do to LeBron James, like they do to, President Trump, like they do to President Obama, it's okay. Because their opinions of me don't matter.
Right.
Right? So when we have these homes that have displaced fathers, single moms, single dads, drug abuse, where mom and dad are even in the home, we now have these people who are not receiving not receiving, that's my dog Miracle, guys. Not receiving validation from home. When they don't receive validation at home, they have to try and get it somewhere else. The next stage they go to is an institution, school. And they're not going to get it from school. The very rare case that the one teacher or the one coach will be the person that changes the trajectory of somebody's life, right? But those are anomalies.
Right.
They're not the rule, they're an exception, right? Where one person came into this person's life where mom and dad were drug addicts or dad wasn't around in their life and they were completely about to spin out of control, but the basketball coach poured into my life and changed my life. So when they don't get it from an institution, because usually these individuals find themselves getting kicked out, Saturday schools, punishments, and they're treated as if they're the problem. And they are making bad decisions, but we don't understand that their bad decisions are really a basis on what they're missing at home.
Right.
So then when the institutions don't show up for them the same way the house didn't show up for them, they go where? To their friends.
Yeah.
And their friends lie, cheat, steal, and use them as individuals, right? And so when that happens, they now have no trust anywhere, and we lose them.
Right. So I want to tie that back to, you growing up. So we talked about you were a talented athlete, but you were, whilst always struggling with this, mental health and suicidal thoughts. And how did that tie in? You talk about your home life. You grew up in Clovis, California. Mm-hmm. You went to Clovis High School, grew up in a middle-class white family. So on paper, it looks good, right?
Yep.
But you talked about that kind of, your your parents maybe lacked those emotional support
for
you,
yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did that lead into, your eventual drug addiction?
Yeah, so the mechanism and the way it works is really simple. when you cannot cope with emotions in a healthy manner, which means by talking about it, going to therapy, being a part of support groups, and working through emotions, you will try and find a way to fix those emotions. We do that in our behavior. So you have class clowns, you have bullies, you have people who abuse substances, you have people who eat. And for me, the only coping mechanism I had in my early years was sports, which was great. The problem is when I stopped playing sports, I still have my problems, right?
Right.
Now, if I was playing sports and going to therapy, I'd get it all sorted out because my therapist would be helping me repackage reality with a stronger perspective, right? I'm not doing any of that during my school years. I'm putting a helmet on. My helmet on is keeping me safe to some degree, but when I take my helmet off, all the suicidal thoughts, all the anxiety, all the depression, the isolation exist, and they're growing with time because I'm not dealing with it, right?
Right.
Think of it as a cup, and you're filling it up with water. Eventually, when you fill it up, if you don't pour anything out, what's going to happen? It's going to spill over the top, right? Or if you have a full soda bottle that's never been opened and you shake it, it builds pressure. Shake it some more, it builds more pressure. If you open that while it's under pressure, it's going to explode. Humans are the same way. When we don't deal with our experiences and we don't talk about our experiences and cope with these things and we just stuff them away, we're building up emotional pressure that at some point has to be released. And it's released through many different outlets. For me, it was at 18 years old, I got involved with just smoking weed. It was a coping mechanism that I found. Nowadays, youth, first coping mechanism that they're going to find is a vape pen.
Yep.
And they'll all tell you the same thing. It helps my anxiety. And they're probably right. It does. Or at least they think it does.
Right.
Right? Because what happens after you use that stuff frequently, just say 2 weeks. That's all. 2 weeks. You're hitting a vape pen and you're a young kid. It helps my anxiety. What happens when you don't have your vape pen? Now your anxiety is worse than before because you had something that stopped you from feeling. And then when you don't have it, now you have a hypersensitivity feeling to these emotions that you hated to begin with. And you begin to panic because I need to get this vape pen, and that's where I was at with just smoking weed. It was just like, I'm not going to smoke every day. My friends are just doing it. So I smoked and then I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Not realizing at that time I was using it to cope with my emotions.
Were you racing BMX at this time?
No.
So where did BMX play into this?
I stopped my senior year. I didn't even go to the grands. I was leading the points for the 19 and 27 expert group. The race is in November over Thanksgiving. My birthday's November 8th. And so I moved into the upper 19-year-old class in November at the grands. I was leading the points and I took a job in San Diego as a network administrator for this guy who was Entrepreneur of the Year of California. He was starting a wireless internet company back in 2002. He was inventing wireless internet radios that he was going to put on towers outside of neighborhoods. He was going to be the first person in the world to provide 802.11b access to homes. So you basically would have an internet card like we used. They were actually external back in the day. You would put it into your PC or your laptop, and then the radios that were outside the neighborhoods would beam your internet. He was looking for a network administrator and offered me 6 figures to come down there because I was really good at computers. My social anxiety had led me to isolating in my room, and part of that isolation was building computer networks while I was hiding from people. And so I quit racing before I graduated high school because I was offered the job about 6 months before I graduated high school. And so the goal was to finish high school and then move down there right after I graduated. Wow. So there was no bike when I started. So remember, I'm struggling with these emotions and the bike is helping me. Now I'm going to parties because I'm not traveling for racing. And I've got all of these things that I hate about myself. And I'm putting myself basically in the oven, right? Going to a party for me is putting myself in the oven.
Right. It's a big step.
It's complete uncomfortableness.
Right.
Because people are having fun, I'm not. People are talking, I'm not. People are, socializing, I'm not. All of these things are like it's having a mirror in my face. And when I looked in the mirror with how I was, I hated who I was. So at these parties, it was only a matter of time before I caved in and just did what everybody else was doing.
Right. So you started, and I hear a lot of kids, I'm just drinking, just smoking weed. Was that the kind of mindset
Sure.
with you at that time?
Yeah. It's just weed, right? It's legal now.
Right.
It's just a plant.
Right.
It's not cocaine. It's not heroin. It's just weed.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. Not realizing of all the 14 people that I know that have died that I grew up with, 13 that I grew up with, one that I know is a family friend, we all started smoking weed. We all started with just weed.
Right.
And just alcohol.
For most people that do have a drug addiction, like you had said, most of the people that have overdosed in your life, it all started with alcohol and weed.
And weed. And you know, some people are so... Weed is not a gateway drug. Weed is not a gateway drug. And it's like, I'm not telling you if you smoke weed one time, you're going to end up homeless, sleeping in the gutter.
Right.
What I'm saying is you don't get to choose. It's not your choice. That's the key, is people think, I'll never become a drug addict. So did I. I was on the cover of a magazine, one of the most gifted athletes in the world in the sport of BMX, had sponsorships with Fox Racing, Airwalk shoes, Spy sunglasses. They didn't sponsor amateur athletes. They sponsored me because I was that good.
And this was at 18, you were on the cover of BMX.
This is at 18. I was on the cover of that magazine right over there. You know, I had the willpower, the strength, the discipline, the athletic gift to be able to conquer anything. So I'll never become a drug addict. Are you kidding me? Doesn't happen to somebody like me.
Just weed and alcohol.
Just weed and alcohol. We're having a good time. Don't worry about us. It's fine. You know, we all had that personality. And I found out later, you know, it's not a choice. Nobody chooses to become a drug addict. Not one. Never met one. And I've met a lot of them. You know, nobody chooses to become a drug addict. Just like nobody chooses to become homeless. And that's a totally different issue. But nobody chooses that. There's events that led up to things, and there's genetic dispositions when it comes to addiction that can take people down a road they didn't think they were going to go down. Nobody started using drugs or mind-altering substances with the mindset that I'm going to become a drug addict who loses everything as a result of today.
Right.
Who would do that? None of us would ever drink. None of us would ever use drugs. And the people that did think that, if they did think that, well, then sure, they're bad people.
Right. I mean, if you tell someone, hey, and I think you talk about this in some of your videos. If you would have told me at the beginning, hey, if you smoke this weed, you drink this alcohol, in 5 years you're gonna be homeless and in prison, probably wouldn't have done it.
No. Right. And you know, people take that as me saying that if you smoke weed one time, you're gonna go to prison. No, for me, for
the individual,
for me it was.
Yeah.
And if somebody would have been able to come and tell me that and say, look, dude, don't do it. This is what your life is going to look like in 5 years. Just don't do it. I would have said, all right. You know, I would have tried to find something else to, you know, save me from what I was experiencing. But I made that choice. The choice was to go through this doorway. The choice was to pick up for the first time.
So that's a choice, right?
That's a choice.
At the very initial beginning.
Everybody chooses to use at one point.
Right.
The addiction is not a choice.
Right.
To be taken over is not the choice, right? Addiction is merely somebody who cannot stop a behavior despite the consequences that occur, right? The guy that has 2 DUIs and signs a paperwork that says, if you drink and drive again and kill somebody, it will be murder. They sign it.
Right.
But they can't stop. Despite the consequence of spending life in prison if you kill somebody behind the vehicle drunk. Why? Because they have an addiction that controls their choices now. They have an addiction that clouds their perspective. They have these things that are occurring in their life that they're trying to escape from that's beyond their immediate control. Sure, they're making choices. And sure, they have to make choices to get out of the realm of addiction. But the addiction itself was not a choice. And for the person that's listening right now that's drinking alcohol that believes that people choose to become drug addicts, well, then why didn't you become a drug addict or alcoholic? You've smoked weed. You've had a drink. You're just that strong. You're just that strong with willpower. You're just that disciplined that you don't have to drink every day, all day. That you don't have to drink on your lunch break at work. Give me a break.
Yeah.
That's not the way it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My story exemplifies the definition of resilience, discipline, structure, routine. I went from a prison cell to the Olympics, and I'm telling you right now, if I had a drink today, I'll be dead in 6 months. Because that addiction still exists in my brain. And if I change the way I feel through mind-altering substances, I lose the ability to make choices. I can't explain why.
It's a battle every day.
If I were to start using again,
yeah.
I would lose the battle.
Right.
Today, the battle is continuing to do what I know works.
Yep.
Right? I don't have to be like, oh my God, I can't drink today. I've been relieved of that obsession. Right? My time in recovery has relieved me of that obsession. But when a person is in addiction, it has nothing to do with willpower.
Right. So you talk about, you did make that initial choice, and eventually it would lead to, a 4-year prison sentence. So if kind of back up, what was the next step after, you made that choice? You were going to parties, you were starting to partake in alcohol, smoking weed. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you made that choice, and it's just weed, it's just alcohol. But then what came next?
I started using other drugs just like everybody else, cocaine, and that cocaine mainly was the other one that we saw, alcohol, cocaine, and weed. And then a pharmaceutical pill called Oxycontin, which most everybody knows about now. They didn't in 2002. Came onto the scene, and that was the drug that fixed me. That was the drug that fixed me. Because when I used Oxycontin, a pharmaceutical opioid painkiller that I found out was no different than heroin, it just came in an orange bottle and not from the cartel. It took away my anxiety. It took away my depression. It took away me feeling like I couldn't be a part of parties and socialize. It really fixed me, or so I thought. And so when I felt fixed, I thought to myself, well, I found it. I found what I've been looking for this whole time. I found something that can take me away from who I am and make me feel like a better person. I just recently put my buddy's wife in rehab, 31-year-old. She weighed 102 pounds, abusing cocaine. And she's like, I feel like I'm a better person when I'm on it. I know that. I get that. And it's crazy because you're 102 pounds. You're about to lose your job. You're about to lose your marriage. You're a better person? Hello? What realm of reality are you even living on? You're not a better person. You're becoming worse. And because of it, you're losing everything that matters around you. You can't see that? No, they can't. Because they truly feel when they're on it that it's fixing them.
They don't see that outside perspective.
No, they can't. Because there's something inside of them that we can't see that the drugs appear to be fixing for them. And that for me was opioids. It didn't matter what it was. It started with Oxycontin. Vicodin would have been fine. Percocet would have been fine. Morphine would have been fine. Eventually it turned into heroin. But those drugs took a hold of my life in a way that other drugs didn't, because I could smoke weed and I could use cocaine, but I was paranoid and anxious on those drugs, and I hated anxiety. I hated paranoia because that was kind of like my natural disposition, right? I was naturally paranoid. I was naturally anxious, and I hated that part of myself. But when I took opioids, it removed that. And that removal of those things that I hated about myself was a miracle, because nothing else did that. Nothing else was that effective. It got me out of bed. It put me to bed. It made me social, no anxiety, no depression, no suicidal thoughts. I was fine. And my brain that's all it wanted.
Yeah. And the effects, would just, so do you not, I guess, you're in it, it makes you feel good. You said it gets you up, it puts you to bed. And eventually, we kind of talked about people don't make that, it becomes an addiction, right? And you become, you need it.
Yep.
You're looking for that, I guess, just a function at that point.
Right.
Right.
And the whole time, by the way, I'm not going to become a drug addict.
So you're still telling yourself that.
Right. You're still telling yourself that, right? Because, well, drug addicts are bad people. I'm not a bad person. I just use these because it helps me.
Does it make it okay? So there's like this stigma, right, of these prescriptions. It's prescribed by a doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to do heroin. That's for junkies, right?
Right.
Is that kind of, there's a stigma there. Like, it's okay if it's prescribed by a doctor, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I always say that the upper middle class Caucasian mom loves her Adderall when she gets out of bed, and she loves her Xanax to go to sleep. And in her mind, she's not a drug addict. In her mind, she doesn't have a problem because she just drives to Walgreens, drives up to the window. She didn't have to get out of her car. And they hand her a bag and nobody knows what's in it. But they can't function without it. Every time they're emotionally unstable, I'll just take a Xanax. Anytime they lack energy, I'll just take some Adderall. Adderall is crystal meth, same thing. If you look up the actual molecular structure of Adderall in comparison to crystal meth, it's nearly identical. You know what I mean?
Amphetamine.
Yeah, it's an amphetamine. And Xanax is just a benzodiazepine that absolutely wipes out every emotional response that you can have.
Wow.
Numbs you completely out. Right? So you have a generation of individuals, mainly millennials, that were introduced to the pharmaceutical boom of this billion-dollar industry of take these to fix how you feel. It's no longer take this to fix your blood pressure, take this for your multiple sclerosis, or take this for your cancer treatment. It's now take this for how you feel. Right? Oh, you feel bad? Here, take this. Oh, you're anxious? Take this. Oh, you're depressed? Take this. Oh, you lack energy? Try this. Oh, you're in pain? Take this. Right? There's no actual development of healthy coping skills. Like, oh, you're anxious? Well, why are you anxious? Oh, you're just stressed? Well, this is how you deal with anxiety.
Right.
This is how you deal with stress-related anxiety. Now, if we have somebody who's been sexually abused to a traumatic level for many years of their life, they may develop these anxiety disorders in which we have to medicate them to help them get through the day. There are gray areas.
In those extreme cases, definitely.
Right. Absolutely. We have to treat them specifically, but that's not what the pharmaceutical industry is designed to do. It's designed to get every Tom, Dick, and Harry and their wives the pills that they need to change the way they feel, because you shouldn't have to feel that way. You're human, though. You should feel that way. You should experience life and its emotions, and you should learn how to deal with those things. None of that was happening, and Oxycontin took that from me.
Right. And I tell kids all the time, like, a little bit of struggle is not a bad thing if you can learn how to deal with it, right? It makes you a little stronger, makes you kind of understand how to deal with things. And if you're just prescribing, you're not actually fixing the problem. There's always a why behind everything. Okay, why are you feeling that way? Like you had said.
Yeah.
So if you can't identify and fix the why, it's going to continue happening. And you basically, these drugs are a temporary fix.
Yeah, they're not even a fix. It appears to be a fix. It really is just making things more worse, because I truly believe that every one of us are experiencing emotion in life. And in our experiences of emotion in life, we have a duty within ourselves and the universe to overcome these situations, to right our wrongs, to become better each day. And if we don't do that, we only expand the level of discontention. We only expand the depression, the sadness, the guilt, the shame that we're experiencing, because we're not actually doing what we are called to do as human beings. And that is to work through these things and overcome them. There's some kind of internal mechanism that we have that the shame will build if we don't go to work. The shame will build if we don't do the work of working through what it is that we're experiencing. The pills can't change that. They can help us ignore it. They can help us feel like it's not actually in existence. But the reality is, if you're in a situation in your life where you're experiencing high levels of shame, guilt, anxiety, depression, and you're not working through that to remove it, or at least minimize it, even though the pills are making you not feel like it's there, it's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. The discontention is still there. The unhappiness will still exist. It's underneath what those pills are doing. If you took those pills away from you, you would find out that the mound that you have in this present moment is way bigger than before you started.
Wow.
You just don't feel it.
Yeah.
You're not actually doing what you've been called to do as a human being to overcome that. We all have those experiences. And what's crazy is if people actually were cognizant of what is occurring and they worked through that experience, when they got through the other side, this whole world of opportunity exists for them.
And from your experiences, you know, all this stuff going on, because you're in it when you are, you know, under the influence. And as an addict, you're in it, and you can't see that outside perspective. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned you had lost a lot of your friends that you did have. Did you 13? And so kind of going back when you were under the influence, not necessarily lost their life, but like did you lose a lot of friends that kind of just left you and went away from you because you were on drugs?
I was the worst one out of the group. And so, you know, people disappeared from hanging out with me very quick. 21, 22. By 23, I was alone. And those individuals, many of them ended up dying after I went to prison. They weren't dying when I was 21. They weren't dying when I was 20. And so that helped us believe that everything was fine. There was no problem. You know, nobody's dying. Nobody's losing jobs. We're all just getting pills and they feel great and we're having fun playing video games and, you know, hanging out at our buddy's house. But they stopped hanging out with me when I started getting heavily into methamphetamines, started using needles, because now I am now what we were told you don't ever want to be, right? The people that come from the other side of town. Right? The people that come from a lower socioeconomic region, because that's only where drug addicts come from. That's what middle class and upper class neighborhoods have a persona of, right? The persona is that every homeless person is lazy. They just need to get a job. Every junkie or tweaker comes from the other side of town, right? They come from families of immigrants. They come from African-American communities. They come from white trash trailer parks, right? We have this visual for what a junkie looks like, a visual for what a tweaker looks like. And these are built by systems that society has put in place, right? We don't see that it actually exists in upper class areas. It actually exists in middle class areas. It just looks a little different, right?
Right.
Because what's an upper class tweaker? An Adderall addict.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Right.
You know, what's an upper class junkie? It's an Oxycontin painkiller addict, Percocet addict, hydrocodone addict. You know, a person that gets the stuff from the pharmacy. You're still an addict. You're still the same individual that is controlled by the same mechanism from the people on the other side of town. We just have these labels for them that present the person as different, right? The situation is different. You know, 78% of youth who drink or use drugs before the age of 14 have been sexually abused.
Wow.
78% of your kids that are using and drinking or vaping have been sexually abused. And you can take that with you now.
Yeah.
When you see a kid and you hear about them getting in trouble with drugs, 78% chance if they're under the age of 14. So what are they really doing? They're trying to escape.
Yeah, trying to cope with what happened.
What happened, right? Think of a young female who's sexually assaulted in her early years. You know, I was speaking with somebody, dating somebody previously for a very short period of time. Her uncle molested her for years. 2 years or a year or 2 years in the house with her dad and her mom. And when she said that happened, the family won't talk to her anymore. But let me explain something. While that's happening, this woman is now feeling like she'll never be loved. This should have never happened to her. She should have been able to stop it. All of these things. Luckily for her, drugs have never become a coping mechanism. But for many of those who do, they're trying to escape those stories that took their value. Those stories that created a negative belief system in themselves. How do you escape that? You have to find something that changes the way you feel, unless you're the anomaly, right? 78% means that there's a high majority of kids that are using drugs at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 that have been sexually abused. Almost all of them that are using drugs under 14. So it's obvious that drugs or mind-altering substances are an effective coping mechanism, or at least in the beginning, to deal with a high traumatic event.
Which lead to, other things. And, but at the end of the day, you have to find, when you have a traumatic, situation like that, you're going to have to find something to cope with. And usually drugs are the coping method.
Right. Because is a student going to come up to you and tell you about the sexual abuse that occurred? No,
very unlikely.
Why would they do that? A lot of times they don't even want their dad, their uncle, their sister, whoever it is, their brother, to get in trouble.
Right.
Because if they do that, they'll break the family up. And if I tell you, you'll judge me. You'll think that I'm no good because of it.
Right. And you see these women that come out 20 years later and they're ashamed. Why didn't you come out earlier?
Well, yeah, but because it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
They came out 20 years later because what did I say about the emotional pressure?
Yeah.
I need to tell somebody, or they've done the work, right? They went through therapy for all those years. You know what? I'm finally going to say it.
Yep.
I was sexually assaulted. I was sexually abused by my dad. I was sexually abused by my uncle, And a lot of times they don't want that person to get in trouble. They worked through it and they've healed and they talk about it. And it's a thing of the past. But for many, it's not. And they've developed an addiction in their life, and they find themselves in places where people can look at their situation and then make kind of societal judgments.
Right.
They're lazy. They just need to get a job.
And going back to your coping method, we talked about the victims of whether it's, sexual assault. A lot of them, it does lead to drugs. And for you and your situation, it led to drugs, and it led to this kind of spiral downward where you, a lot of your friends kind of left you. And you talk about this, this story, and your friend Nate, he was, him and his father were kind of had stuck with you and allowed you to stay on their couch and feed you when you were in these difficult, some of the difficult situations in your life and time. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. Nate was my childhood best friend. We played sports together. Our families were really good friends. We went on family vacations together. Alex, he didn't agree with my dad. My dad kicked me out of the house. My mom kicked me out of the house because of my behavior, selling drugs. I was reckless, man. I went to prison for armed robbery. I was not an upstanding citizen at this point in my life. And Alex didn't agree with kicking me out. He felt that, you don't abandon your son. And I think that there were some great things about what Alex was thinking, But Alex took the same approach with his son, and it didn't work. His son died in his room. It's been 13, 14 years now. And he wasn't somebody that I ever thought was going to die. I never saw Nate use the way I used. I never saw him use needles. I don't know if a needle was involved with his drug overdose. They kicked me out of the house. I'll never forget that night. It was pretty late. I think I showed up at like 10:30, 11. And his dad just said to me, "Oh, you can't stay here anymore." And, excuse me, I thought to myself, I don't know where I'm going to go. Nobody's answering the phone anymore for me. I'm a quote unquote junkie. When I say junkie, I don't really like to use the word junkie. When I say the word junkie, it's more or less, quote unquote junkie. I just would never look at somebody that was struggling with heroin and be like, man, look at that junkie. It's such a high stigma word, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I didn't know where I was going to stay. And I just said, can I talk to Nate? He said, yeah, Nate's in his room. So I went into his room and I was like, man, your dad says I can't stay here anymore. And he goes, yeah, I know. And I was just, I said, can I get a sleeping bag? And he's like, why, Hoff? And I was like, I'm just going to go sleep at the high school tonight. And he goes, what? And I was like, yeah, man, like, I'll just sleep at the high school. Can you just give me a sleeping bag? And he's like, get your phone and call somebody, bro. And I was like, man, I've been calling people. Nobody's going to answer my phone, bro. Trust me. And the reason I went to his house was because nobody answered the phone. And Nate's house wasn't my first choice. Nate's house was the last resort. He was the last house on the block. When I couldn't find somewhere else to stay that had drugs around, I would go and crash at Nate's house. Or if I'd been up for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 days, straight on meth, I would go sleep at his house for 5 days straight. And so he gave me a sleeping bag, and, it's so weird. Like I tell this story in my speeches to high schools and a lot of medical conferences too, but a lot of my messaging has become so articulated towards mental health and addiction that I don't have time for some of the stories that have like huge shock value. Right.
Right.
It's so weird. I can visually, like, I can remember it like it was yesterday. Like I was walking out of his house. I remember how I felt. Like I was so beat up. I was like a damaged dog, the ones that have been beaten and just cower. I was just so coward because I was just filled with shame and guilt. And, he just had that one last yell. He said my name, Hoff. And I turned around and I could just see him, and he said, look at yourself, bro. What are you doing? I was like, don't worry about it, man. I got it. In my mind, like I could turn it around. Like there was a fighter in me, a competitor in me that thought, we could turn it around. And that was the addiction, really. There was no turning it around. I wasn't going to wake up one day and stop. I wasn't going to be able to just fix things. It was going to take a miracle to take me out of the situation that I was living in and put me in a place that I'm in now. It wasn't going to be of my own doing. And that night I slept at the high school. I slept in the baseball stadium, Clovis High Stadium, under the announcer tower.
So you went to Clovis High and you ended up
sleeping
at Clovis High.
Yeah. And it was weird. That night it was cold and it was raining a little bit. So I needed a place to stay dry. Excuse me, my voice is getting dry. And I needed a place to stay dry. And it was cold enough to where I remember when I woke up, my bones were kind of locked. Like they don't really like fire up. And that was like, I think my first experience of what, being homeless and being cold was going to be like.
Right.
And that was the first night of about 6 months, sleeping on the street in hotels and having nothing, man.
Was that your lowest point?
Yeah. Physically. And spiritually, I would say, and emotionally, I would say it was absolutely the lowest. Prison was.
And how old are you at this point?
I'm 23. No, 22, almost 23.
Okay. So, you hit your rock bottom and then so you basically eventually would get a 4-year prison sentence. You'd spend time at Wasco and Tehachapi State Prison.
Mm-hmm.
What led up to that? Because I know you were charged with armed robbery and several sentences, but I think there was some stuff that led up to that probation. What was that process?
So the armed robbery was actually in 2004. My parents spent a bunch of money on an attorney, kept me out of prison for armed robbery. I'm let out on probation, and I've got all these drug programs to do. The time that Nate's happening is somewhere around October of 2006. Okay. And January 1st, 2007 is when I had a spiritual experience, the day before I was arrested. That spiritual experience was the catalyst for why I am the way I am today. On January 22nd, I was arrested in a home that I broke into that was up for rent. They thought I had drug overdosed and died. The people came in to show the house. They couldn't wake me up, so they called the cops and the paramedics. I woke up at 2 p.m., January 22nd, 4 cops in the room, guns drawn on me. And they violated my probation for possession of needles, narcotics, violated my probation. And so I went to court for these kind of petty charges, but faced a violation for my serious charge from 2004. So 3 years later almost is when I'm in court now on a violation for probation of armed robbery, home invasion that I committed. So it's just those charges, but I was violated. And so then at 30 days after being in jail, in Fresno County Jail, I was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. They said I had 672 days credit. And so I was going to serve 23 and a half months. And that was what I did.
So the armed robbery, and, I think you had said, obviously you're under the influence at the time. You're an addict at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What did you even understand what you were doing?
Which part?
The actual armed robbery. Did you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what you're doing.
Okay.
You know what you're doing, and that was a choice. Those types of things are still choices, right? You don't become possessed.
Right.
You become willing to do whatever it takes to get more.
To get the drugs.
Right. Drug abuse, substance abuse, addiction is not a free pass from consequence, and it should never be. You should suffer the consequences of your actions. Part of the consequences for your actions, however, should involve proper treatment for what the issue really is, right? We have a system that's built up on locking people up as a consequence and providing nothing else, and then releasing them back into society years later and saying, don't do that ever again. What did we fix? What did we change? We didn't change anything. We just put them in a box. Well, I could lock somebody in this studio right now for 2 years that struggles with addiction, and they'll be sober when they get out, but they won't be different.
Right.
So what have they been doing for the last 2 years? Waiting for them to be able to get out so they can go use and escape from themselves, right? Because a person cannot just come up with the coping skills on their own to deal with the emotions that are causing them to use in the first place, or the trauma that's causing them to use in the first place, right? If they could, they wouldn't be on drugs. They would have developed the coping mechanisms on their own a long time ago. So we put people into jail and we don't actually do anything for them, right? We don't give them that coping skill because it's not built that way. So that was, I kind of lost my train of thought, but that. So
going into prison, I think you spent 2 years in prison?
23 and a half months.
Okay.
Yep.
And was that kind of split between? So that was kind of split between Wasco and Tehachapi State Prison? Because I know you mentioned you had kind of spent time at both.
3 prisons. Started at Wasco, which is a reception yard. It's basically a warehouse. They send everybody from Central California to Wasco. They send Northern California people to a different prison, and they send Southern California people to a different prison. And from there, they figure out, once they get your paperwork, where you're going to go, how many years you're going to do, what kind of stuff you have on your jacket. In other words, what kind of inmate are you? Where's the best prison to put you at based on who you are? I started at Wasco, and I started with all the heavy hitters because I was in there for armed robbery. So they house you in reception yards based on your crime, not your time. So if you're a violent criminal, you're going into a violent criminal yard. So everybody that I was in a cell block with was there for assault with deadly weapon, attempted murder, mayhem, robbery charges, crimes of that nature, right? Like there was a guy in there that has an A&E murder special that I was in there with, James Fagone. He was the guy from Fresno that worked with the girl and put the guy in the bucket of acid and then put him away and was caught. Like he was in there, so I was in a place with high level criminals, but then was transferred to Tehachapi State Prison, which they call mainline prison, where my prison time there was, I was put there because of how much time I had to do. So I was with low level offenders, mainly people that were in there for drug possession. They would consider domestic violence also nonviolent. So a lot of domestic violence, a lot of drug possession, drug use, drug sales, burglaries, theft, like high-level theft, stuff like that.
Right. So how did prison, I guess, you talk about, there's kind of almost an awakening of prison as well. You had this thought, like you said, was it 4 things? I'm gonna go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to be a professional or motivational speaker. I'm going to start my own nonprofit. Mm-hmm. You did all these things,
Yep.
You said you're going to do them. Yep. And there was all these people, I guess, probation officer eventually.
Parole agent. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Parole agent. Right. Officers that were saying, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to become, you're going to go out and you're going to be right back in. Mm-hmm. That whole stigma. Can you talk a little bit about your prison time and how it kind of made you who you are today?
Yeah. So realistically, what changed me was my spiritual experience. I found Jesus Christ. I don't push my faith on anybody. This is just my experience in life, and this is what happened. My introduction to a power greater than myself, whom I call Jesus Christ, I would say that for 23 years of my life, I lived in a square room with concrete walls. There was no windows, there was no doors. And inside that room, I believed that I was trapped there because life was unfair. I was trapped there because my coaches were out to get me, my teachers were out to get me, my parents were out to get me, the cops were out to get me, society was out to get me, the universe and God was out to get me. And so my punishment was to be inside this concrete box in which life was miserable. When I had the spiritual experience, that same room became windows with a door. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. How is there windows? And how is there a door to get out of here? Like, I've been in a room for years, trapped, where everybody hates me and life is against me and I'm miserable. The room didn't change. It had always been glass windows and there was always a door. I changed. My spiritual experience allowed me to change. The room was always the same. When I changed and I saw that there was a window, I saw that there was windows and I saw that there was a doorway, I could, 1, see what was out there. And 2, I saw that there was a way to get out there. The door didn't open for me until I did the work, though, right? The initial change that came from my spiritual experience was the ability to see life differently. And seeing is only part of what people need to be at, right? Is some of us can see that life is different, but we can't experience life differently until we do the work. And so that was what prison was like for me, was I took this spiritual experience that happened to me before I got to prison, January 21st, 2007. And I felt divine inspiration as I was reading the Word of God through the Bible and paying close attention to everything that was occurring around me. I was no longer living life without thinking. I was no longer living in ignorance. I was now looking at life out of this room because there was windows I could see. And so I felt God say, you need to get on your bike, race professionally, you need to go to the Olympics, you need to start this program for kids, and you need to become a speaker. But I didn't know how I was going to get there. I knew that there was a door that was going to lead me to it, but I didn't know how to get out of that door to get there. And as I was reading the Bible, I read this verse that if you could be trusted with little, you'll be trusted with much. And I thought to myself, okay, that's how I'm getting out of here. And I'm not talking about prison. I'm talking about the walls, the prison that I put myself in through my own mind. My own perspective was putting me in prison. And God had given me the keys to get out, but I had to do the work for Him to give me the keys to get out. And so I can be trusted with little. If I can be trusted with little, I'll be trusted with much. So I started thinking, okay, I need to start managing my life, all of these small choices that I make on a daily basis, but I need to manage them as if they are everything that God's telling me he wants for my life. The racing professionally, going to the Olympics, the nonprofit organization, being a speaker. I couldn't have what was outside of the door until I could manage very small items that he knew that he could trust me with those things. So I started with brushing my teeth, the smallest of items, man. And it's probably pretty cool for you to listen to this because you've watched the Goldcast video, right? There's no introspect to why.
Right.
Why brushing the teeth? How did this all work? Like, this is the mechanics behind a 5-minute video that just motivates you.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Right. It's like, okay, I'll start brushing my teeth every single day and I'll treat that as if it's going to the Olympics. And that in itself, I think, had power because I've learned that the intention in which we carry ourselves really takes us to the destination that we want or we don't want, right? And so how I brush my teeth is also how I make my bed. It's also how I conduct myself in business. It's also how I conduct myself at the Olympics. Some people might look at brushing your teeth as completely insignificant, but I see it as an integral process to why I am where I am today. And so I learned how to brush my teeth, then I learned how to make my bed and organize my stuff every single day, but I was taking care of these tasks as if I was at the Olympics. And so I was manifesting what God was showing me outside of the room long before I ever got there through my actions, right? I was telling God, I want what I've seen you say I can have. And so I will prove to you that I want it through my daily actions of being trusted with the little things. Because if I can be trusted with little, you'll trust me with much. And over time, I had to do a lot of work on resentments, coaches, my parents, society, institutions. The reason that the room was concrete was because I was a victim, always a victim. I had to let go of that mentality. So I had to go back through these situations in my life and meditate on them and understand that, dude, your coach really saw a lot in you. You just didn't believe in yourself. You were hurting because your dad wasn't there. You had a coach. He may not have coached you the way that was necessary. And we've had that talk now, crazy enough. My 6th grade basketball coach, he's just, I didn't know how to reach you. What did you need? And it was, I needed somebody to be there for me emotionally, man. I was hurting and I didn't know it. So it's not like I could have been able to tell you why I was hurting. I was a young boy. I didn't know, but I was hurting. I had to go back and relive those situations. I had to relive the 12-year-old who sat in the seats and said, come on, Dad, please show up today. Like, I don't care if we win or lose. Like, I just want you to come through those doors so you can watch me play. I have to and have had to go back and talk to him, a 12-year-old, me, and say, it's not your fault, Tony. Your dad was working. It had nothing to do with you. Your dad's got a story just like you do. He doesn't tell you he loves you because he doesn't love you. He tells you because his dad never said, I love you. Affection has never been how your dad operates. Your dad loved to bring you Skittles home. Your dad loved to put Michael Jordan shoes on your feet. That's how your dad was showing you that he loved you. It's not your fault. It doesn't mean that you don't have value. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be capable. But I didn't know how to show up for myself at 12 years old.
Right.
Now me going back through this process while I'm learning how to take care of all these little things is I'm healing from my wounds, right? I'm healing from these experiences that were skewed in my perspective of reality. I'm rewriting the story, right? I can, and I will be able. And I will do that over time by taking care of little things. And over time, those little things will develop into big things. I had 2 years to lay the foundations, right? 2 solid years that most people don't get.
Right.
Because they have jobs, because they have a spouse, because they have kids, right? They have these obligations.
Right.
I tell people prison was the best thing that ever happened to me. Where else can you go where you don't have to worry about anything? They feed you 3 meals a day. You have a bed, you have a shower, you have a toilet, you have a sink, and nothing else to do. I had all the time in the world to work on myself. right? To right my wrongs, to let go of resentments, to forgive myself, to develop characteristics about myself that would serve me and not self-destruct me. So when I got out, I was completely different. And I was met by all of those individuals who were in disbelief because I was very verbal about what I wanted to do. I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to race BMX. You know, I had my cover of my magazine, you know, and there, look, I was on the cover of a magazine, you know, but people they don't care. Society doesn't care for the most part, you know, they don't care if you were on the cover of a magazine. You're in prison, bro. You're going to come back again. We've heard this a million times.
That's the stigma, right?
That's the stigma, right? But at the same time, look, they're prison guards. They're normal people.
Yeah, my dad's
They don't have compassion training. They're normal people, which means they were raised in normal homes, that created belief systems, perpetuated stigma based on whatever biases that family has towards homelessness, towards drug addicts, towards the Black community, towards the white community, towards the government, towards all of these things. These are all things that we're learning in our childhood through parenting, right? They're just normal people.
Right.
They don't have specialized training to understand who they're actually dealing with inside those walls. Right?
Right. Absolutely.
California recidivism rate when I got out of prison in end of 2008, basically 2009, was 93%. 93%.
So
it's a guarantee.
Yeah.
A guarantee.
Most people follow in that statistics.
Right. I mean, that's a guarantee.
You weren't one of those, so.
If I was going to have a life-altering surgery and they said, Hoff, you got a 93% chance of surviving, do you want to do the surgery? Duh. 93%? That means what? 1 in 100,000? You know, there's 200,000 inmates, 250,000 inmates in prison when I was in there. What is that? 1 in every 50,000 make it? If there's a mathematician around, I would love to know what that number actually is. 250,000 inmates, 93% recidivism rate. What was the actual percentage per inmate that actually made it?
That'd be interesting. So how did you become that 7% then? So you were able to, you paroled on, what was the date you paroled on?
December 13, 2008.
December 13, 2008. And did you still have people, you still have people telling you, you're going to be right back?
Absolutely. And that's okay. So I've developed this thing and it's called the 7 pillars of sobriety. It's also called the 7 pillars of success. And I believe that this is exactly why I am where I am. The foundation to this home-like structure that is balanced by 7 pillars is faith, God, spirituality. If you're not a God person, just put faith there. I have a conscious contact, a very frequent contact with my God. Through the good times and the bad times, and through the times of which it seems like nothing is happening. My life has to be founded at that level. The next thing is absolute honesty with others and myself. If you follow me on Instagram, I just made a post about those 2 things. It's pretty easy. It's typically pretty easy to be honest with other people. Being honest with yourself, though, is one of the hardest things that a person can do, because they have to actually look into the mirror and they have to evaluate themselves, right? It's really easy to evaluate somebody else. It's really easy to say, well, you do this wrong, you do that wrong, you do this wrong, you do that wrong. You could be better here, 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 and here. How many people can look in the mirror and actually be honest with themselves? Not many, right? The super successful people, absolutely. That's why they're successful, because they can say, I'm not putting in enough effort. They can say, no, I'm wrong here. I need to go admit that I'm wrong. They can say that these people are actually stopping me from being successful because I'm allowing myself to behave and think the same way as this group. I need to leave this place, right? So honesty is the first pillar. The second pillar is willingness. I have become willing to do whatever it takes, no matter what. If you told me to do a headstand for an hour, I would do a headstand for an hour. It might not make sense to me, but if I truly believe that you hold the information to unlock another door, then I will do that. And if it doesn't work, I will evaluate why it didn't work. I won't blame you. I'll say, okay, why didn't the headstand work? The next one, after willingness, is giving. I have built a life around giving. I truly believe that every human being should be focusing on making the world a better place. And it's such a phenomenon with human beings because we are the only species on this planet that takes and does not give. Trees, all they do is give. Right? They take soil and nutrient from the ground and they pump it out into the air so we can survive. Fish clean the water. Right? Eagles make sure that there aren't too many snakes and there's not too many mice. Same with owls. Right? They clean the ground, but then when they poop it out, where does it go? Back into the ground, and it works as a nutrient for the soil. Every species has a very specific purpose in which they are giving to the planet to keep the ecosystem alive. Yeah. It's not always the case with humans.
And I have this saying, I say, the more you give, the more you get. Not necessarily materialistic, but in like a life sense. The more you give, the more you're going to get.
Right. And this is where, circling back on what we talked about with kids, is what is the intention of being an influencer on TikTok? What is the intention of? Because if it's material things, the likelihood of it actually manifesting are very little because you end up giving up long before you ever get to see that blessing, because there is a long road that you must endure before you can see the windows of heaven open up. A person that's got the right intent is not chasing material items. They're chasing the satisfaction, the contentness that comes with feeling like you've had a greater purpose outside of yourself, right? When I give a homeless person a meal, when I answer the phone and I console or just listen to a person who's going through something, it makes me feel like I've had a greater purpose. Being on your podcast is a form of me giving back to the universe, right? Because your listeners may find something in what I say or you say that changes their life forever. And I get those messages. That's why giving is so important. That's why it's helped me become successful, because I have given with no expectation for anything in return. I give because it feels great to give. It gives me life to give. Yep. After giving, the fourth pillar is discipline. In prison, I learned how to be disciplined. In prison, I learned how to do good work when I didn't want to do work at all. And the ability to do good work when I didn't want to work at all has allowed me to do great work most of the time. It doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, cold, hot, or indifferent. I'll find a way to do it.
Right.
I have to. It's, my talent can only do so much, but my discipline can do a lot more than my talent. I've learned that. It's not my talent that carries me, it's my discipline. Because my talent only wants to shine when it feels like it. My discipline forces me to shine even when I don't feel like it. And that is the consistent work over time that allows the door to open and for me to walk out. The next one is structure. I know what I'm doing at all times, and I learned how to do that in prison. What time I'm waking up, what time I'm working out, what time I'm studying, what time I'm writing a book, what time I'm eating lunch, what time I'm working out, what time I'm going to bed. And I've learned how to work a routine tirelessly. Doesn't matter how boring it gets, I work it because I understand the more I work the routine, the closer it gets me to the reward. And the reward, again, is not always financial, right? The reward is walking outside of that door and getting to experience life in its fullness. After routine is support groups. It's extremely important. It puts us around people that are like-minded. It puts us around people that challenge us to grow. It puts us around people that have the balls to tell you you're wrong and you shouldn't do that.
Right.
It puts us in places, for myself or those who struggle with addiction, like NA, AA, therapy. For people that are just looking to be successful, they don't have addiction issues, it puts you inside a library or Barnes and Nobles where you're buying books on how to be successful, how to understand home loans, how home loans work, how the stock market works, how starting a business works, what you need to do to become a lawyer, how to become a great lawyer, how to understand yourself, how to understand your childhood, to process your experiences. You're becoming more self-aware of not only what you're doing, but yourself and why you do the things that you do. Self-improvement is the key to moving you forward out of the position you're in to the position that you want to be. Those 7 pillars were developed in prison. When I paroled prison, I was also given the key to the door that I'm living in now.
Powerful.
It was cool. And it's gotten cooler because even though the door has been open and I feel that I'm actually experiencing life in a way that makes me very emotional and grateful and humble and gracious, like I say, gracious, there's different depths to the experience that I've been awarded, right? I could stop right now and I could say that I've lived an amazing life, but there's so many more levels to what is going on. I want more of that.
Sure.
I want more of that experience. I want more of that realness and the depth in which I've been awarded through a constant working of honesty, faith in God at my foundation, honesty, willingness, giving, discipline, structure, routine, and support group self-help.
So going post-prison now, so you parole and you go into professional BMX. Did you say 5 months? Was it 5 months after you paroled?
Yeah, I trained for 5 months and went straight into pro. And people were like, dude, you can't do that. Like the sport's progressed. It's not the same as when you were. And it wasn't. It had progressed. But I truly believed in the gift in which I was given, not by my choice. That was that I was a naturally gifted athlete, that I could do things that the average person could not do when it came to sports. And I had prepared for 2 years. I was working out in prison for the Olympics long before, ever being introduced to racing or anything like that when I came back. And so I was physically fit. All I had to do for 5 months was reacquaint myself with the bicycle. And that's what I did. I showed up and raced my first pro race 5 months later and took
So BMX was back in your life and you were having a lot of success. So were drugs still in your mind? Was it still kind of popping up?
Yeah, every day. And it still has been after 13 and a half years. It's just what comes with addiction. I worked for this guy who knew my dad. He gave me a job opportunity while I was struggling. He was in recovery, a recovering heroin addict. And he said he'd been sober for over 20 years. And he said every day that's gone by, he's thought about drugs. And he said, it'll be that way for me too. And that has stuck with me because it's been true. And it's not like, oh my God, I'm going to use. Oh my God, I'm going to use. It's not that. It's some kind of random thought at some point in the day comes in. It's a memory. It's not like, hey, I want to use. It's like, remember when you did that? Remember when you did this? Or if I'm experiencing something emotionally that I don't like, my brain automatically says, drugs fix that. Pills will fix that. And I have to turn those tapes off.
Well, yeah.
So the bike freed me from that, right? Because just like it did when I was a kid. But now, not only do I have my outlet freeing me from it, I also have the internal work that I do when the helmet's not on. I know how to take care of myself now through a spiritual program, through therapy, through group therapy, group sessions. You know what I'm saying? I know how to alleviate the stress that may come with my body saying that drugs will help you cope, because that neural pathway that I created in my brain through the addiction is there. It will always be there. It's hardwired there.
Right. Because before you had those supports in place, you would say, when I took my helmet off, I wanted to kill myself.
Right.
Now you had those supports in place when you took your helmet off.
That's right. And so now everything that I'm hardwiring in is a completely new pathway based on those 7 pillars with the foundation and faith in God, right? That pathway is what builds me up. That pathway is what leads me into progress. That pathway is what's gotten me from the prison cell to the Olympics.
Right. So,
but in that pathway, I am confronted with the choice to use the old pathway. It's still an option. It will never go away, which is crazy. It will always be there as an option, and my brain will always present it as, hey, which one do you want? Right? I have to reinforce the pillars so that my old self doesn't go in and say, yeah, let's take the easy route. That'll fix me.
Right.
You know?
So you have those supports in place. And
absolutely.
And you continue having success in BMX. And I believe you said you blew your knee out, which ended your BMX career, but there was a new career in training athletes.
Yep.
And you have trained athletes all around the world.
Yes, sir.
And was it in 2016 when Brooke Crane, when you guys went to the Olympics?
Yep. So I won those 5 races my first year, moved to the Olympic level 1 year after being back on my bicycle, made 6 finals at the Olympic level with the best athletes in the world, then blew my knee out. When I blew my knee out, I was devastated, obviously, but I liked coaching and had been starting to get into coaching while I was racing. And within, 4 years, I had coached, a lot of decorated athletes from all over the world. Many of them were Olympians, world champions, and national champions. I met Brooke Crane when I first started coaching in 2012. She was really iffy with having me train her. But after the Olympics in 2012 and 2013, she approached me and said, I want you to coach me. And we went to the Olympics in 2016. It was an amazing experience. She's had to work really hard to get there and overcome a lot of her own challenges that she faces as a human being. And she took 4th place, which was amazing. She was definitely capable of getting a medal. In fact, I would say that she should have gotten a medal. She just, we decided on a gate together, and she changed her decision on that gate last minute. And I truly believe it cost us the 3rd place medal. But you know what? We win together and we lose together.
Right.
It's not her fault. It's we win together and we lose together. The experience in itself was something I can't explain, though. It was just so amazing.
From being in that moment, from going to a prison cell and everything you had been through and everything she had been through as well.
Absolutely.
So the matchup is, as I think about it now, the matchup with the coach and athlete is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's been, and I would say I'm more of a friend to her now, a brother to her now than I am a coach. We're training for Tokyo, obviously. And we'll see how it goes. We don't know because the Olympics got canceled. She was literally on the team because they were going to still do the Olympics. We weren't going to just go through the qualification process like it was normally going to go through. So she was automatically selected. Then they canceled the Olympics. Now we go back into the selection process next year for the Olympics. So the goal is to get to Tokyo, and then I think that she's going to evaluate what she wants to do from that point forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. I mean, I would just imagine that going from that prison cell and being in Brazil for the Olympics in 2016 was just amazing for you to kind of have that transition and transformation.
Yeah. And it was tough too, because I was going through a really big transition in my personal life as well. I was engaged and the engagement broke off. And so, I had a lot of heartache from that thing going on in my life, but I was still able to find happiness and gratitude and have one of the best times of my life being there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And today you have a lot going on. You travel over 200 days a year speaking at high schools and businesses, different conferences. And so you get to touch a lot of people. Mm-hmm. You have a nonprofit called the Free Will Project. You're writing several books right now, and you have all this amazing stuff going on. So I would imagine that foundation you built in prison has allowed you to, continue doing these things and continue having this amazing impact on others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my laser-like focus is not as laser-like. I as disciplined as I am, as structured as I am, as routined as I am, I'm not as much as I was in prison. But I'm not at a time in my life where it's so critical. It's not life or death anymore, man. I can take a day off now. I can not work out one day and be okay. I can sleep in a little bit because I deserve to sleep in.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm still chipping away at what I'm doing, and I'm still using the foundations that I built in prison to get me to where I'm going. And that's, I'm writing 3 different books, and my goal is to have a treatment center down the road at some point. I'm nowhere near done speaking in my mind. Nowhere near done speaking in my mind, dude. Like, I got at least 5 years in me.
Right.
Like, I haven't seen the pinnacle of speaking yet. My story hasn't reached the audiences that it's supposed to reach. And I just have that feeling deep down in my gut that it's not over yet. COVID was, as disappointing as COVID has been for my career, something inside of me has said this is not going to be forever, and get ready. Because when we come back, I got a video that's approaching 9 million views and still ticking 1 million views every couple weeks. You know what I mean? And those people that are watching it, some of them are business owners, some of them are school administrators, and my story is resonating, and they're going to be reaching out, and it's going to be putting me in front of more people. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah. And I'm excited, on this podcast, we do have, it's students, we have principals, teachers, and different people, farmers, all kinds of people. So hopefully they could see you and your amazing work. You have an incredible Goalcast video, which I got the opportunity to show my students last year, my 12, 13-year-olds, and they were so touched by that. And
yeah, when you say last year, it means February.
I know. So I'm thinking school year,
last school year.
Last school year. As a teacher, I think in my year's like the school year at this point.
Yeah.
So you continue doing all these amazing things, and you're touching, literally hundreds and thousands of people all the time. And it's amazing to see how you're so selfless, everything you do. Mm. As we kind of approach the end of the podcast today, I want you to talk about a couple things. And
sure.
One that really stands out to me is the Free Will Project, your nonprofit organization. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I developed the Free Will Project in 2012. It's an action sports-centered nonprofit organization targeted to work with, we aim to work with at-risk youth. It started with a summer camp and developed into an after-school program called BARS, Behavioral and Academic Restoration Through Action Sports. And basically, the idea behind the Free Will Project is what I truly believe is true prevention, true substance abuse prevention, true behavioral modification, restoration comes through mentorship involving activity. And we could take these kids as an organization. We're no longer operating as an organization anymore, but basically I would take these kids who came from at-risk areas, no money, no families, drugs, a lot of stuff's going on in their life. And through activity that they enjoy, we could empower them. And that empowerment is what kept them away from drugs. I didn't have to tell them that they were going to die, that they were going to go to jail, that their brain cells were going to go away if they used these substances, their teeth were going to fall out. Nobody cares about that. Doctors, nurses, they need to learn that stuff. But kids, what do they care? You could tell kids that 300,000 people a year are dying. That's just a made-up number. Let's just say, 40,000 people a year are dying from the opioid epidemic, right? What does that kid care if an opioid is the first thing that ever fixed him?
Right.
They won't.
They won't.
The only thing that you've done is give them a statistic to stop doing what's fixing them. Well, don't tell me to do that. I'm not going to become you, bro. I'm not going to die. I won't do that much. Right? We have all of these justifications in self for why we're never going to become that. And so what our program did was empower kids away from it. You don't have to use drugs. You can do this. You don't have to be a part of this. You can do this. And we were very successful. We took kids with 0.8 GPAs, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Like you have to try to get that, to 3.0s, 4.0s the next year in high school. I'm closing out the organization, and we were able to do some fantastic work. We had money left in the bank, and one of our kids from Southeast Fresno grew up right across the street from the fairgrounds, very poverty-stricken area. I gave him $30,000 to put him through college. And I gave another student that I met when he was 12, smaller amount, $2,500. But he has some opportunities that Danny doesn't have. And so, Danny has been a 4.0 student. He got on the bike and the program. He was just amazing and started doing 360s and 540s. I mean, we sent him off to Camp Woodward, which is like the camp of all camps for action sports.
Right.
And, he cried the other day when I told him I was giving him the money. He didn't believe me. He thought that I added too many zeros.
So this was recently?
This is recently, yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
Wow. That's amazing.
And it's been great. I picked him up a laptop and, things that he's never had before.
How old is this kid?
He's 19 now.
Wow.
So he's in his freshman year at Fresno State.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so that to me is just, more giving and selflessness that's so important. And the organization and the work that we did from 2012 to 2017 allowed us to, if Danny makes it, that's all that matters.
Yeah. If you could touch one, I would say if you could touch one student or one person, it makes everything worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you're writing 3 books right now.
Yep.
Can you briefly talk about those 3 books?
Sure.
And when they're kind of coming out?
Yeah. So one's a memoir. It's basically my life story, more detailed than even you've heard today. I talk a lot about institutions, the homeless epidemic, how I see that, probation, my parents, sports, coaches, like all of these things. Then I have my microprocess journal workbook that will coincide with the microprocess 90-day devotional. And the 90-day devotional is about implementing life-changing habits over 90 days that coincide with the workbook that help you get into creating structure and routine and disciplining yourself so you can live out the pillars as I have lived them out and change your life to whatever it is that you would like to change it to. So I'm kind of working on all 3, so to speak, simultaneously, just in small pieces.
Awesome.
And I would expect sometime next year for those to be ready.
Incredible. So hopefully our listeners kind of look out for those, and that'll be incredible. Are there any other projects or anything you have going on right now?
No, that's
that you
it.
want to talk about?
No, I'm just waiting for COVID to kind of do its thing.
I like how you said that's it. And you're writing 3 books and speaking and doing a podcast and
learning how to play golf. Learning how to play golf. If you want to know about that, I'm playing golf like 4 or 5 days a week right now. No, that's, I'm staying busy, of service to a lot of people right now. I've just donated a lot of time through COVID to treatment centers and jails and places that are offering internet stuff just so I could stay plugged in. Like I said, I think off the air, I've just never been too good for anything.
And that's amazing. And, I'm so thankful that we kind of connected on Instagram and made this happen. And I have a couple little kind of segments I do have on the Freedom First podcast. And one, which you're going to be able to touch on quite a bit here, is what advice would you give for the future generation of not only students, but also, maybe someone struggling with drug addiction or someone that is struggling with mental health, since, this is Suicide Awareness and Mental Health Month. Mm-hmm. What would you tell someone for the future generation? What advice would you give them?
First of all, you're not alone. Human beings are human beings, and we're not as different as people think. There's only so many emotions in the world, and every human experiences them all of them. So you're not alone, but nobody's going to save you from yourself. That's your job. Nobody saves you from yourself. I don't know what's going on with this younger generation, but there is this idea this persona, this perspective that people don't deserve to feel certain ways. People shouldn't have to feel certain ways. And it's completely based on error. No, you're going to feel disappointment. No, you're going to feel hatred. You're going to feel racism. You're going to feel disappointment. You're going to feel struggle. You're going to feel unloved, unliked, unworthy. You're going to feel all of those things that make you want to quit, that make you not like life, that make you feel like things are unfair. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going to have to feel that, but you're going to have to feel that. And it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to feel it. You can't stop it. We cannot change the world to that capacity. When you have that perspective, you, my friend, are living in a concrete box. When you change from that perspective, it is when that box turns into windows with a door. I don't know why kids are getting on this train. But life is not easy and it's not fair. Yes, we can go out and be a part of causes and do things to make the world a better place. But if the method in which we do that is built on hatred, it doesn't work. You're only making that concrete box smaller and tighter. You're going to feel more hatred back at you. You're going to feel like the world hates you even more. You're going to feel more unloved. It's just not the approach. Embrace what you feel and let it teach you how to be resilient. Learn how to manage the emotions that you experience. Learn how to see emotions as friends that are trying to teach you about yourself so you can walk outside of the door and you can go and experience life. Because I really think that a lot of people they're making life so narrow, they're not actually experiencing it.
That's powerful.
Adults too, by the way.
Right.
Not just the younger generation. It's okay to feel the way you feel. I'm sorry you have to feel some of the things you feel. There's things that I don't want to feel too. But because I'm willing to navigate those emotions without acting out in hate and keeping it about myself, I believe that I'm experiencing life the way most cannot or do not want to, because they have to do the work. Nobody is going to save you from those emotions. You do.
It's powerful. I have something, I didn't really have this in mind, but we talked about this throughout the podcast. Briefly, what would you tell a young person, maybe in middle school or high school, that is, maybe they're running around with the wrong crowd. Maybe they are interested or around or tempted to try alcohol, marijuana, vaping. What would you tell those young people?
I would say that if you're already in the realm of thinking about trying things, then it's clearly, in my opinion, you're already going through things that you don't understand yet. And that you would take a step back and really ask yourself, what do I gain from doing this? If you gain friends, I can guarantee you're going to lose more in the long run. If you're gaining social status, it won't last. If you're gaining approval, it won't be real. If you're trying to escape, you're actually suffocating yourself more. Think about where you're going and what you're about to do, and think about where most people go when they take that decision. 14 people I know that I grew up with, 13 I grew up with, one was a close family friend, died. Some are still in jail, in and out of jail. Some are still in and out of rehabs. I'm 36, 37 in November. And we all said it won't be us. It'll never happen to me. And I know people that are functioning alcoholics, living in dysfunctional households with families that they've created, slave to the alcohol bottles, slave to cigarettes, slave to drugs. They just manage it and go to work, but they're not getting to experience life. The answer is having the courage to tell somebody, I don't feel right. I need help. And trusting somebody to help you, because there are people that will give you their hand and they will help you. But if you don't ask for help, you will never get it. Drugs may appear to be helping. Vaping may appear to be helping. Cigarettes may appear to be helping. Alcohol can appear to be helping. It's not. I truly want people to experience life. And numbing it out and finding things to stop you from experiencing life are not the answer.
Yeah.
Just have the courage to ask for help. It was the best thing that I ever did. It's my number one thing that I teach kids. We're all going through stuff. The answer is talking about what we're going through. Just tell your parents. Just tell your teacher. Just tell the therapist. That stuff that you're holding on to, just say it. Don't worry about what people think. As kids, that's what we do. We worry about so much about what other people think and what other people are going to think of us and how they're going to judge us. Just do you. The quicker you learn to do you, the quicker you find freedom and the ability to experience life in its fullness. And nothing beats that. No drug, no significant other, nothing. No job, no monetary. It can't replace what that feeling is like.
That's powerful. That's just amazing advice, especially for all the young listeners listening to this right now. Tony's been through it and he understands and he speaks to these students every day. So you get a chance to, you see this every day. So thank you for that. And as we end the podcast, I have one last segment we do with every guest. It's called the Freedom Fighter of the Week. This is someone that's been influential in your life that has helped you get to where you are today. Who's your Freedom Fighter of the Week, Tony?
His name's Toby Wade, an African-American gentleman that was serving a life sentence for murder. I met him and he had been down for 14 years. No man has ever been so selfless in my life. No man has ever showed up for me every day and pushed me, comforted me, encouraged me, disciplined me so selflessly. He showed me what faith looked like. He said, I'm going to get out of here. God's going to let me out of here. I'm getting out of here. I promise you, I see it. I feel it every day. And everybody around him said, nope, you're not getting out of here. Nope, you're not getting out of here. You're crazy. I don't know why you're talking like that. He really was the example of how I should live my life, how to work the pillars. And he got out of prison after 21 years. He was released. He's graduating, getting his bachelor's degree. He's 58 years old. Doesn't matter to him. Smart and Final is the only place that we give him a job. He doesn't complain about it. He's okay working there. And above all those things, he was a black guy, not supposed to talk to a white guy in prison. And I was a white guy, not supposed to talk to a black guy in prison. I've been out of prison for a long time, and still to this day, nobody's come close to what that man's done for me. Toby Wade, great. He's one of the only reasons I'm where I'm at right now. It's his example and his mentorship every day for, 12 months, a long time.
And you're still in contact with him today?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll text him after this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tony, for being on today. And where can our listeners see your work and where can they, follow you and reach you at?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram, Tony M. Hoffman. You can find me on Facebook, Tony Hoffman Speaking. I have a website, TonyHoffmanSpeaking.com. My podcast is One Choice on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast app. You can just search Tony Hoffman in any podcast app and you'll find the One Choice podcast. And I think that's it. Yeah. If you guys have questions or concerns or any comments, you can send them Blaine's way, you can send them my way. You can send them to me on social media. I answer all those questions that people give me on social media. Now's a good time when I'm not touring. When I'm touring, I'm getting hundreds of messages a day, and it's really takes months for me to get back to people. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity, man. I wish you the best of luck with your podcast, and thank everybody that's listening right now.
Thank you for being on today.
Thanks,
I appreciate
man.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Freedom First podcast. Please subscribe and give us your honest rating on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Let freedom ring.